But first, I'm joined by Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng. Good morning, Secretary of State. Let's start with those numbers. We now know that the typical household is going to have to pay £700 more each year for their heating, while they take home £500 less. Mr Sunak has promised £350 back, the majority of which is a loan, by the way. Now, all that before 7% inflation kicks in. You're an economic historian, so we all know you can add up. Where's the missing 850 quid per household going to come from?
So we've said very clearly that this is a difficult place to be. We know that this is a global challenge because you've seen a quadrupling, 4 times increase in gas prices. And I was very clear at the beginning of the winter in September that the price cap would protect people. It has protected people. You're right to say there's been an increase in the price cap. But I was very pleased to see that the Chancellor of the Exchequer last week came up with the measure, the set of measures that you've described. Now, the £200, I think, is a real help. And it's not just the £200, it's the 150 off council tax. But there are other measures as well. There's the warm home discount, which has been increased and is now applying not only to 2 million people, but to 3 million people.
100 and something
So there is £150. It all adds up. But you're quite right to say that...
an £850 gap. The average typical household is going to find themselves, what, £50 to £100 short every month?
It's going to be a very difficult time, and I've maintained that throughout the last few months. That's why we've got the price cap. We're trying to shield people from global price increases. It's not something that we can do 100%, but I think the package of measures that the Chancellor announced last week were impressive and extensive as well.
Well, I don't know. When you say impressive, it's not that impressive to the average household who'd be told it's difficult. I mean, forgive me, that people are going to be saying, is that all you've got? It's going to be difficult.
Well, look, I think that people understand that this is a global issue. So gas prices have gone up 4 times. And clearly what's happened is that the price, the retail price, hasn't gone up £4, and that's because 4 times. And that's because of the energy price cap. We're the only country in Europe that has a price cap that's shielding consumers, and we will continue to do so.
Yeah, but since you brought it up, in France, I think that the rise is 4%. I mean, it's 54% here. I mean, what have the French got that we don't have?
So the French,
maybe
the French were exposed
government?
to higher prices. They've also managed to scare a lot of people who are trying to invest in France. We've got the highest inward investment of any country in Europe. That's relevant, Trevor, to this whole equation. We're securing jobs, hundreds of thousands of jobs. We've got a very, very low unemployment rate. But you're right to say that the cost of living is an issue.
Look, let's talk about the actual difficulties that people are going to face. How is this thing with the loans on energy going to work? What happens if in 2 years' time, when you're supposed to start paying it back 40 quid a year, I set up my own home for the first time in 2 years because I'm a first-year student or I've been separated from my spouse. Does that mean I'll still be paying the £40 uplift, but I won't have benefited from the loan, will I?
No, so you'll get people who get the upfront loan will be paying it over 5 years, and that's how it's going to be repaid over 5 years. And it's a smoothing process.
But what if I haven't had the upfront loan? Is my question really? That's what somebody's going to be asking.
Yeah, you will be paying your energy prices according to the price cap, according to what the price cap will be at that time.
But would you still be paying the £40 a month, a year? Sorry, I beg your pardon, £40 a year. Would you still be paying that back? Even if you hadn't had it?
So, as I said, you'll be paying according to the price cap, according to what your supplier.
No, but that's a different question. That's an answer to a different question.
No, it isn't.
If I haven't had the benefit of the £200, will I subsequently still be expected to pay £40 extra on my bills?
What I'm trying to say is that the way in which the money is recouped may be reflected in the price cap, and my department is working with Treasury to work out the exact process how that money is recouped. But that's the principle.
So what you're going to try and do is when you get to that point, fix it. But we haven't really got a solution now.
The principle has been established that the Treasury is going to give £200 and then the money will be recouped over 5 years. Okay. But of course, I can't predict to you. I can't tell you what the price will be in 5 years' time. But it will be recouped off that. All
right. Look, there's a separate point here, really, which is it's one about fairness, really, isn't it? You're going to be treating millionaire homeowners in exactly the same way as people who rent a studio apartment. We know that the highest 10% of income earners pay about 4% in energy costs. The lowest 10% pay 13%. But you're giving them the same amount of money.
I don't think that's quite right. In fact, actually, the way that we would have given them the same amount of money is if we'd adopted the Labour policy of essentially just removing the VAT. That would have given everyone, regardless of their income, the same amount proportion back.
Well, everybody's still getting £200.
So where we are here, and you mentioned it earlier, is that we've of course got the £150 discount off the council tax, which relates to bands A to D. Now you'll appreciate that the highest income earners in the country are not living in A to D properties generally. They're living in higher bands, so they're not going to get the £150. So it's not right to say that people are getting the same amount back.
Well, let's talk about that council tax thing, because the banding is based on historic property values.
That's
back
right.
To 1988, which means that people in London who live in homes worth more than £500,000 are in the same band and will get the same help as people who live elsewhere in the country in homes worth less than half of that, i.e. people in wealthy people in London homes will get the same money as poorer people in the rest of the country. How's that working?
Again, that's not quite right. I mean, you're quite right to say that the council tax refers back to 1991, I think, prices. But that's a general issue with the council tax. What this rebate, this discount does is it targets people at bands A to D. So wherever they're living, these are not people living in the most lavish homes or the most affluent people in their boroughs. And I think they're getting reasonable support. It's not going to pay for everything, but I think it is a step forward in trying to alleviate the pressure that many people face.
All right, I just want to give you the chance to clarify, because you mentioned it a moment ago. The Chancellor is not going to consider cutting VAT on fuel. That's off the table.
Well, I was just mentioning the fact that the VAT off fuel is a benefit that is quite regressive, actually, because rich people will benefit just as much as people on lower incomes. That's not something which the Conservative Party or the Chancellor want to do. They want to have more progressive taxes so that people who need the money are the ones who get it.
So he's definitely not going to do it?
That's up to the Chancellor. I have spoken to him, and that's not something that he's considering. He had a very full package last week. I was there in the House for 70 minutes. I listened to it very carefully. I agreed with all of it. And I think it's a good set of measures that he's brought in.
I talked to your colleague Liz Truss last week, and I did put it to her that the cut in household income equates to about 12 weeks shopping if you shop in Waitrose. I worked out this week that it's actually more like 20 weeks if you shop at Aldi. Why are you punishing the poor by forcing them to choose between heating and eating?
Well, as I've tried to say, most of the measures that the Chancellor announced last week with regard to energy bills are very strongly targeted at people on lower incomes. We haven't talked about...
Yeah, but they're losing lots and lots of money out of this national insurance.
We haven't talked about the warm home discount. I mentioned that. You seem to dismiss that, but I think that's significant. I think that the £350 package is significant. And also, if you look at the bigger picture, we are the fastest growing economy in the G7. People are not facing unemployment. And you've got to remember that in the middle of COVID in 2020, people were prophesying that there'd be millions and millions of people unemployed. And thanks to the interventions that the Chancellor made, we avoided that. So I think the prospects, the economic prospects challenging are actually promising as well.
All right, the reason I didn't mention the Warm Homes discount is it's been there for years.
Yeah, but it's been increased.
It's not new. It's not
no,
new. But all your taxes are new.
But the number of people who are going to benefit from it is going to increase 50%. Right. That's 1 million more people.
All right, let's talk about... this is a politics show, and let's talk about politics. Sir Charles Walker, one of the Prime Minister's most loyal supporters, is in The Observer this morning saying it's inevitable, that's his word, that Tory MPs will remove the Prime Minister from office. If Charles Walker's saying that, game's up, really, isn't it?
Well, I don't know where Charles Walker's, where he's coming from. I don't see what he's seeing. I think he's a good vice chairman of the 1922. Well, you know, he's entitled to his view as I'm entitled to mine.
Because he's talking to his colleagues.
And I have to say, Trevor, you know this. I mean, lots and lots of people have said things are inevitable and they never happened over the last few years. And I just want to wait and see. I'm very focused on delivering the agenda, as is the Prime Minister. I spoke to him earlier in the weekend. And we're very focused on making sure that we have a strong economic recovery, that we've dealt with the Omicron virus and also with the COVID pandemic. That we're creating jobs, we're bringing in investment into the UK. Those are the things we're focused on, as well as dealing with international challenges, as we're seeing in the Ukraine and with Russia. So that's what we're focused on. Charles Walker was also elected on the manifesto that we all were elected on 2019, and I'm sure he's 100% focused on delivering on that manifesto.
So as we're on the issue of Ukraine, are you one of the people to whom the Prime Minister has said, it is reported this morning, that it will take him a tank division to drag him out of number 10? And if you were you one of the people who might have said to him, Prime Minister, shouldn't you be worrying about the tank divisions threatening Ukraine rather than...
I think he is worrying about the tank divisions facing
did he
Ukraine.
say that?
No, he didn't mention that at all. I had a very... good conversation with him. We were focusing on jobs. We're talking about economic recovery. We did mention Ukraine, but I don't recognise the language that's been reported.
Yeah, but we're talking about this, and in a way, it's all of Mr. Johnson's own doing, isn't it? I mean, Mr. Sunak and Mr. Javid have both said this week that they would not have used the words that he used about Sir Keir Starmer. Let's start this bit by just asking you, would you have used those words? I
think it's entirely legitimate.
Would you have used those? You would have used those words?
It depends what the context was. I mean,
but in that context, would you have used those words?
In that context, I think it was perfectly reasonable to mention the fact that Sir Keir had apologised. Sir Keir himself apologised on behalf of the organisation that he led about the fact that they failed to prosecute Jimmy Savile. So the fact that he apologised suggests that he does, at some level, bear some responsibility. Now, I don't...
The Prime Minister himself, the day after, said, that's not what I meant. Are you sure you want to say that you would have used those words?
No, what I'm trying to say is that it's about leadership, it's about accountability. Sir Keir apologised, and so that was something that was absolutely in scope. Now, I'm not saying that he had personal blame. He didn't. And we've been very clear about that, and the Prime Minister clarified that position as well. But I think in the cut and thrust of debate, when people are talking about leadership and accountability, bringing up something that Sir Keir himself apologised for seems reasonable.
Would it have been good leadership if he had taken the advice of his now former head of policy, Munira Mirza, and apologised for giving the impression, which I have to confess, pretty much everybody else in the country took, that he was talking about Sir Keir himself?
I think he clarified what he said.
But
he was very clear that Sir Keir did not have a personal responsibility. It was not his fault personally.
Should he have
But Sir Keir did apologise on behalf of the organisation that he led, and that's what leadership and accountability
Should the Prime Minister have apologised?
I think the Prime Minister was absolutely right to clarify his position. Munira Mirza has her position and subsequently left her role.
Steve Barclay, he's now the Prime Minister's new Chief of Staff. He's already a minister. He's got his constituency. One's tempted to ask, if he's got enough time now to be Chief of Staff, what's he been doing with all his spare time up until now?
I think what Steve's doing, I mean, it's a great appointment, by the way. I've worked with Steve in government for 4 years now, and he's one of the most honest, most rigorous, most collegiate ministers we have. And I think it's absolutely right that we should try and get the Cabinet Office and number 10 working more cohesively together. And that's what Sue Gray said in her report. She said that there were leadership structures that were opaque. It was very difficult to see where the accountability was. And by appointing Steve, I think the Prime Minister is recognising that, and he's trying to combine the number 10 operation with that of the Cabinet Office. And as you know, Steve is head of the Cabinet Office in his role as CDL, Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster.
Secretary, I'm looking back over, what we've discussed, and what you're saying to me is Charles Walker. Well, who knows what he's on when he says this stuff about the Prime Minister having to go. You don't agree with Mr. Sunak and Mr. Javid that Prime Minister that they shouldn't have used those words. You don't think he should apologise. The Prime Minister's friend Donald Trump once said that he could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue, shoot somebody, and he wouldn't lose voters. Well, what does Boris Johnson have to do for you to call time on his premiership?
What Donald Trump said was completely irresponsible. It's not comparable. You're mixing these things up, which they shouldn't. They're very different. Prime Minister's accountable with the ministerial code. He's also ultimately accountable to the electorate, and people forget this, but he won a majority as the leader of the party of 80. He has a mandate for the rest of this parliament, and my job as a minister in the government is to make sure that we deliver on that mandate and work hard for levelling up, work hard to increase jobs, to increase investment in this economy. And that's largely what is happening at the moment. And I'm very, very focused on for the next 2 years, delivering on that agenda.
And you absolutely do not agree with the stance which is apparently being taken by your colleague, Mr. Sunak, who is essentially distancing himself from what the Prime Minister's been saying this week.
I was with Rishi Sunak in the House of Commons for nearly an hour and a half last week, and he unveiled a really good set of measures to help people.
No, but I'm talking about what he said about the Prime Minister.
Times. So why I'm mentioning that is that we're working together. We're 100% behind the Prime Minister, and we want to deliver on the mandate that we were elected on successfully in 2019.
Secretary of State, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.